Okay, now tonight we say goodbye to our small group, at least for next 7, 8 weeks. And I think it's real important that we close well. And I give this little acronym that I like to use on the online, and the acronym is RAFT. And what I'd encourage you to do is create a raft, kind of a bridge to if you close well, if you end well, makes a real nice bridge to your next step, whatever that next step might be, whether it is to stay in the same group or move on to something else. But we often do not close very well in life. We tend to run from things, at least if you're like me. Out of sight, out of mind, just take off and move on. But I want to encourage you to close well. And R stands for any reconciliation that you need to make. If you've hurt someone in the small group, someone's hurt you, it'd be good to connect around that. The next two are, I think, really fun ones to do, and especially the next one, A, is to affirm. Can you think of each person in your small group and what you'd like to affirm them? It's especially valuable, obviously, in affirming your spouse. That's one of the exercises that I've wanted each of you to do regularly, is to affirm your spouse, make those deposits in your marital bank account. But how about your small group? Who have you really received some neat gifts as you spent these 9, 10 weeks with your small group? F is fines, and that's what are you going to take with you? What have you learned as a result of our time together? And then T was your next step tomorrow. What do you plan to do tomorrow? What's your next step? What are you going to do after this workshop is over? What I'd like to do now is introduce our panel for the evening. Tom and Janie Langfeld, who shared with us last week on forgiveness, and Bruce and Ashley Podgorski, who shared a few weeks ago on the secrets of abuse. Okay, what I really want to do is just go with some of the questions that you all sent in. And actually what I want to do is read or kind of summarize 3 questions that were kind of along the same lines, and address them first to Bruce and Ashley. And this what kind of question comes directly to you, Ashley, and that is, did your husband ever insist that the problems you were experiencing were mostly your fault? Is that something? Let me just hold on, because before you answer that, okay? So that was a question, and my guess, that's something that many of you have experienced in this process. And along those lines, is it really possible for my husband to emotionally feel or know how much he has hurt me? When Ashley, you think of your pain, your hurt, was it possible for Bruce to really hear that, to really know that? And what was that like? And this then kind of bridges into the next question, and a question that I'd like you all to talk about a little bit, and that is, explain, Bruce, how you got it. What does it mean to get it? Can you really, you shared that a little bit when you talked, but what was it that you really needed to get? And, maybe I can ask Ashley to what extent you got it, okay? So let me just let you guys run with that a little bit.
Okay, well, did he ever blame me for being the problem?
Yeah.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. You're the reason that our marriage is like this. And I think that was really hard for me, because I was such a people pleaser that I would, be like, oh my gosh, it's my problem, it's my fault. And we would be in counselors' offices, and Bruce was the squeaky wheel because of the anger and the rage, and I would just sit there like, numb. And, he'd be blaming me for all this stuff, and I was like, don't the counselors see this? Is this my fault? And I would continue to look at myself and try to determine what part of it I was causing, and yet I was just responding so much to the abuse that I just was numb. That was my defense mechanism. And so I was, looking back, I wish that the counselors that we had dealt with were more familiar with abuse, because I think if it was identified at the time, early on, and we could have faced that fact, that we wouldn't have gone through what we did. I think it would have been a different healing process for us. But yes, yeah, I was constantly blamed for that. And then to the second question was, how did I know that Bruce, or can
Can
someone,
he get it?
can
he
he
understand
that? And I've told people this before, yes. I think it's possible for someone to get it or to understand my pain. I'll use Bruce as the example. When we were in our intensive program and God revealed to him not only his abuse growing up and the trauma of that, but then shifted his eyes onto what that abuse then was doing to me, and that what he experienced as a child he was then putting onto me, he just broke. I mean, and there was such a repentant spirit, and there was such a mourning on his part that I was like, wow, he gets it. He understands. And I didn't feel like I had to defend myself anymore. Like, that I was hurting, and you know, you've hurt me so badly, can't you see? And I didn't have to do that anymore, because he did see. And we could move on from that point. It was like we were stuck there until there was a repentance and an ownership of his responsibility in it. And then I was like, oh, he gets it, and we can move on. So yes, that was true.
So it really was important for him to really understand how much pain you had gone through.
Well, I didn't feel that I could move forward in trusting or feeling safe until he understood.
Yes.
Because it's like every time I put my heart out there, and I would continue to do that, I felt like I used to describe my heart as this little petal, this little rose petal in a box. And I would open this box and I'd go like this, and then I'd test it, and then it'd be like bam, and you know, run right back inside myself. And I didn't feel that until he understood how that rose petal was in smithereens, that I could then start to invite him in my process of healing. Because up until that point, I had to keep him away.
Yes.
And keep him at a distance.
Bruce, can you share a little bit about what it was for you to get it? I mean, you got it, but what? Tell us a little bit about that.
No. There are so many things that I'd rather be doing right now.
Okay, Bruce, let's go.
Let's go have a beer. The reason why I'm up here is because I feel like God has brought Ashley and I through so much, and so much time has gone by over the course of the last 9 years, and I feel like He's revealed a lot of things to us, and especially to me, in regards to how I've treated my wife. And so the reason why I'm up here is because I want to hopefully shed some light on some of the things that may serve one or more of you. All I can say, or one of the first things I want to say, is denial is an amazing thing. I mean, denial is an absolutely amazing thing. When we're young, if we're exposed to a tremendous amount of abuse, it serves us well, because we can kind of push those feelings in, and we can kind of hide from those emotions and not look at them, because our little minds and bodies can't handle them. But when we get older, and you know, we get into a close, intimate, you know, relationship such as marriage, and all of a sudden our spouses are telling us things on a regular basis, or our spouse is telling us things on a regular basis that is very, it's just not real appealing. It's not something that you necessarily want to hear. But for probably 7.5, close to 8 years, I kept my heels firmly planted in the ground, and I completely tried to shift the blame towards her and how she wasn't responding to me. And And it's really almost embarrassing to say, but it was such a challenge to, I mean, I would rally support from my friends. You guys don't realize what my wife did this time, or how she's responding this way. And they'd be like, oh, dude, I'm so sorry, you know? Because I told them what I thought was going on. And, but it has this little experience that Ashley shared with you. It was a matter of a particular time when I realized that the environment in which I grew up in and all the abuse that I was exposed to had really polluted the way I do life, and polluted the way I treat people, especially my wife in this case. And I tell you, when that veil was removed from my eyes, and for whatever reason, God just chose to remove it at this one particular time, it was just this gut-wrenching, oh my gosh, I am so incredibly sorry kind of a response. Because I know what it was like to live in abuse for, 15, 16 years of my life until I finally got out of the house. And to think that I subjected my wife, the person who I'm committing the rest of my life to think that I chose to, or to think that I subjected her to that same kind of abuse on a regular basis, that's a tough pill to swallow. And so for any of you out there who have a problem with your tongue, if your spouse is saying to you on a regular basis, you know what, the words you're saying to me are hurting me. And if your tendency was like mine, to say, you know what, but you're the reason why I'm saying these things, I would really encourage you, the ones who have the problem with your tongue, to take a couple steps back and to look in the mirror and ask God to give you kind of maybe a clear perspective on how the words you say affect other people. Because for 8 years, I verbally abused my wife. And it did an absolute number on her. It broke her down physiologically, emotionally, spiritually in some ways. And thank goodness thank God we're on the other side of it now. But when you talk about this whole notion of getting it, for me, I'm certainly not going to say this for everybody else, but for me, it was not just understanding here that I was abusing and harming my wife the way I was treating her. But it was understanding it here, allowing the knowledge from up here in my head to go into my heart and to take 100% ownership of the abuse I was heaping upon my wife. And it was when I did that, and then when I invited God into the process and asked Him for forgiveness ultimately, then I went to my wife and asked her for forgiveness. That's when there was a 180-degree shift in the way I spoke to my wife, and things have not been the same since.
Thank you. Just to recap just a little bit, kind of two things what I'm hearing you say. One is getting your own pain and loss and hurt growing up. That was an important factor. But there's a lot of head stuff that goes into there. But the second step really in taking ownership and acknowledging that you had hurt Ashley, that sounded like to me that was really a key second step that had to happen.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Jan. And as I had mentioned to you earlier a couple sessions ago, I'd been involved in counseling for, a lot of years, and I would go in there and we'd be dealing with the symptoms. Here's how Ashley treated me, here's how I responded. And it was until we identified my behavior towards her as abusive, that's when all of a sudden the pieces of the puzzle started to fit more closely together. And that was life-changing. And she can tell you how things been.
Thanks. Well, let me switch a little bit and go to you, Tom and Janie. And actually, the question is real similar because it's almost like, Janie, how much does it matter whether he gets it or not? And for example, the question that was coming from you as a participant said, where would you be, Janie, if Tom admitted the affair but never asked for forgiveness or never showed remorse? So it's that kind of picture. And the second question is real similar to that, is how important is it that he is able to say he's sorry, that he's able to take ownership in order for you to move through the whole issue of the affair?
Well, I think, that's the whole issue, is his asking, his remorse, his regretfulness, his asking, even if it isn't the words. I don't even think it has to be the words, will you forgive me, as much as his remorsefulness and how he responds to me and how we interact from that moment on. I don't know that we would be able to move on without, I don't see how we could. I mean, I could make that choice that yes, I wanted to stay in this marriage and I was willing to do my part, but we could never have a real relationship without forgiveness on both parts, without him expressing remorse, without him showing daily in the way he lived his life and the way he treated me from that time on. Without that, I don't see how we could have a, quote unquote marriage.
So since Tom really had to get it too, didn't he? Kind of along the same lines as I hear Bruce needing to get it in order to move on. He really needed to
I think your heart has to be broken. You have to be broken. And your spouse has to know and experience that brokenness. It can't just be, I'm coming to you, we've talked about it, okay, let's move on. There has to be evidence of that brokenness, however that would be different for every couple.
But my sense is you knew when that evidence was there, wasn't it? Just like I'm hearing Ashley, she knew when that evidence was there.
Oh, absolutely. I never needed, from the time he told me about it, I never needed him to ask, will you forgive me? I knew I had to. I knew I wasn't ready to right away. But I knew immediately of that was very obvious. And as I worked through my process, he became even more, it was even more obvious to me that he deserved it. He certainly deserved my forgiveness. And the more I worked through it, the more I realized that that was my choice. And that, and I get caught up when you say get it, I needed to get it as well. And I'm sure Ashley needed to get it as well. And I always hate to put it, he was the one who betrayed, but I needed to get it also. And for me not to have been open to his expressing his sorrowfulness and remorse is just as wrong as him having the affair, I think. I'm really, that's something that's really deep inside me, is that more of us need to take responsibility for our part and for our obligation to accept. When he offers that willingness to change his heart and his life and his soul and his mind, then I have to respond. And if I don't, then I really am saying no to the marriage, and that's not, that's not godly.
You're really identifying the part that you needed to get.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is really being able to receive that, even though my sense you've shared, it's difficult. That was not an easy process to let go of that at all, because you had been hurt, and now to kind of give your heart again, put your heart out there to receive.
It was very, very hard, and had I had to do it over and over, of course, which I know is the case in some instances, it's not just a one-time thing. It makes it that much harder. But everything God asks us to do is not easy, and so I always have that. I always have that option to say no. But what am I saying? I can't just hold on to it. I can't do that and expect our marriage to just hang out there while I do my punishment and my carrying on. Eventually, I have to say, okay, now I decide that I believe in you enough that I can give that forgiveness, and we can work on it from there.
Tom, any thoughts? Well, one of my kind of questions along those lines is my sense is that you were very remorseful. I mean, as I heard you share, you were very sorrowful, and you did put it out there, but then all of a sudden, to let her have some space with that, to let Janie struggle, that's not the easiest thing, is it?
No, and unfortunately, well, I guess maybe it was fortunately, a couple of our kids were deeply, intimately involved in the process. In the very beginning, I don't know how it all that's a blur, and I don't even want to remember any of it. But I do remember our son, who was like 25 at the time. Janie told him what was going on, and he happened to be like at the house the next night. And what I got from him was more punishment than I think I would want to ever have again. He and I never did have much of a relationship when he was growing up. And we had begun, I think, to put it back together at that point in time. And he took me outside, or we went outside, whichever. And I never felt smaller or more worthless in my life. I guess you had to be there, okay? That was the first time I think Tony ever cried for me. And I think I really got a sense of the kind of damage that I did. Because, well, Janie was angry. That was totally understandable. But Tony showed me the depth of the hurt that I had caused. And that was, you know, if what I saw in him was any kind of a reflection of what was going on in Janie, there was no mistaking it. I got it. And it was probably the least pleasant time in my life. So.
It's a part we don't even think about, I imagine, do we? Is the impact that this kind of thing has on our children.
No, I certainly didn't, and nor would I have guessed that it would, you know, hurt them quite as much as it did.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks, Tom. Now, one of the things that has to happen after a breakdown like both of you have described is how do you rebuild this? How do you put it back together? How can you trust again? And I guess I'd like to throw out, part of me thinks in terms it has a little bit about you getting it, Janie, huh? To be able to kind of reciprocate that and to move towards Tom as he's trying to move towards you with his forgiveness. But can you say a little bit about trusting again, and what did you two have to do to go through to trust again?
Wow. I don't have this all down pat, so we just spent hours and hours talking, which we hadn't been good at up until that time. And I think that there was a new respect, even on my part, for Tom, because of his ability to be able to come forward with it. And, you know, it wasn't the kind of thing where I had discovered it and now he was saying, okay, I fess up. It was him. He actually had made that choice on his own. And so I had to acknowledge that respect and the courage that it took for him to do that. It didn't make it any less hurtful, but it made it easier to start to build again. And I don't think it was something that I thought about, okay, you know, today I trust him more than I did yesterday. It's just something that as you, like Ashley said, as you put the pedal out there and it's not stepped on, it's held up in high regard. And he just constantly lifted me up emotionally in terms of, I really love you today, you know, how can I share myself with you? How can I be more for you? What do you need from me? And it just happens. It just works its way into your heart. And all of a sudden one day you realize that he went on a business trip and you're not worried about it. You know, and that might be a while.
Yeah.
But it just kind of takes over, and you realize that your heart is softening and that you're healing. You're physically, emotionally healing.
Sounds like that there's some evidence there, though, that your experiences that are creating that connectedness, that trust is happening as a result of things being different.
Yes, well, yes.
Yeah, you can't, like you said, you can't put your heart out there and get stomped on.
No, and had he abused that vulnerability, then I would have to step back, and it would take even longer and longer and longer. But I just have to keep making that decision to try to stick my hand out there again and take that chance, because otherwise we didn't have a chance of making it. I had to be the first one to try to trust. He couldn't do it all by himself.
Ashley and Bruce, can you kind of tackle the same question? Because my guess is that, Bruce, your anger just didn't disappear once you got it. That maybe you got angry again. And Ashley, you maybe stuck your heart out again. How do you keep from not falling back into that pattern and build trust? What was that like for you?
Well, after the program, there was a difference between anger and rage. There was no more rage. And Mr. Hyde was gone.
Okay, so part of him really did stop.
Part of him stopped. Part of him died there, which was crucial for my healing, because excuse me, I needed to feel safe in the relationship before I could start to trust again. And it was seeing over time, when we got back, that Bruce was safe, that I slowly put myself out, because I felt like my heart was dead, that there was no life in it anymore, and there was no hope, and I just kind of walked around like an empty shell. And when I would put my heart out there and he would value it, I may pull back just out of habit, but I would go back out more often and more often and more often. And then my process of getting it didn't happen until there was safety in the relationship. And I felt that I could now trust Bruce with my heart. And it was at that point that I realized that I had to deal with my own forgiveness for the hurt that had been caused to me. And I described it like I couldn't get outside of my heart. My heart was encased in a wall of hate. I hated him for taking so much of my life away. And I was blaming him for it, and I was holding on to that. And I didn't understand this consciously. I just couldn't understand why I couldn't love. And I thought, oh yeah, I forgave him. But I hadn't. And God just kind of revealed that to me. I was praying, why am I under this bondage? I can't move forward. He's different, and yet I'm stuck. And it was the forgiveness thing. So then once I broke through that, which was a very intensive process for me, I had more of my heart to give. I finally had my doors of my heart had opened, and I could start giving it and see how he responded to me. And when he valued me, that was great. Now, we do have our slip-ups. I mean, as any marriage, we have our conflict. And even we had this really, one thing that has developed over the years of working at this is that we are able to communicate on a very deep level. And I was talking to Bruce even a couple days ago. I said, it's like a bridge, this one area that we were discussing. I said, it's like this bridge that I'm building. And I said, you're over here, and I'm over here. And I'm building this bridge, and then when you say comments like X, Y, and Z, I feel like I'm back at the beginning trying to build that bridge over to you, and I can't get there if you keep saying these things. And so we still have issues of, there's a lot of consequence to any kind of betrayal or abuse. And those consequences have to be rebuilt and have to be changed. And my consequences of withdraw hurt Bruce, but that was my way of protection, and now it's learning to rebuild those bridges. So that just takes time. It's a trust process of rebuilding the bridges.
This rage thing is done. It's behind us, and that's a really neat thing. But the frustration associated with, okay, actually, I'm no longer abusing you now, honey. Come out and let's play. You know, let's have a good time. Let's be a married couple. And didn't happen near as fast as I would like it to. I would have liked it to have happened. And this is where the relationship with God is crucial for me. Okay, because I didn't have the strength on a daily basis to extend her the grace and the patience she needed in order to open up and to trust me. So every morning I would find myself either on my knees or in our prayer room praying, God, I tell you what, I don't have it in me to extend her the love and the patience that she needs. But I know that you can do it through me, and I know that's what you want for our relationship. You want our marriage to be restored. So I'm coming before you right now, completely admitting, the mistakes that I've made, but more importantly now, asking you for this divine intervention thing, because I don't have it in me to just be as patient and as kind as she's conveyed to me over the months and years that she's needed. And God has been faithful, and so that's the beauty of what it is. That's why we're up here. That is why we're up here. It's not to toot our horn and saying, okay, look, this is where we came from, and here's where we are now. It's to say that, we accepted a relationship with Jesus Christ, and we appropriated that into our hearts, and we asked him to intervene on our behalf, because the choices we were making and the sins that we were committing against each other, they were doing nothing but damaging and destroying, people in our lives. And when we invited God into our lives, and he lovingly showed us the way, and he gave us the strength and the love within our hearts to extend towards our spouse, that's the battle right there. I probably shouldn't have gone in that direction.
No, that's fine. That's fine. The challenge really, though, is that ongoing process. I mean, I'm hearing you're not done, and you've still been wounded. Ashley, you have a scar, and that scar is going to be sensitive to the touch. And my guess that surfaces, and you're afraid again. And to work, you have to take that step. And my guess the same thing for you, Janie. There's a scar there that's been wounded, and if that scar gets touched, and it will get touched. Those knee-jerk reactions, it's real easy to feel those feelings, pull away, do your knee-jerk reflex kind of a thing to protect, and the challenge is to enter into relationships.
Right. One thing I wanted to comment about that is that after we got through, and there was safety in the relationship and the rage was gone, at that point, when I dealt with that scar being touched, or I would withdraw, because my number one response is fear. When I would pull back out of fear, I would say, okay, we need to use empathic dialogue here in order to deal with this, because I don't feel safe talking about this right now. And that's how we'll handle things now, is that if I don't feel safe, I'll say, can we please do this? And Bruce will say yes. And one thing too is knowing how to set boundaries, how to say, you know what, I'm feeling hurt in this conversation right now. I think we need to end it and come back to it when we're more able to. So to be able to communicate my needs instead of feeling like I just have to take it or whatever. And like I said, there's no rage, but when my wounds get hurt, I'm very sensitive there. And sometimes I need to back off and say, I'll come back to this. So that's part of the process as well.
Great, thank you. Tom and Jane, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing us?
I guess the little wisdom that I have as I get older and grayer is that doing life, doing marriage by yourself as a couple does not work. You need to be in relationship with other people who have the same goals and values as you do. We hang around with people in this ministry because, first of all, we like them, and second of all, because we're able to contribute, okay? The other thing is we belong to a small group of just regular couples from this church. And we go there not because we're somebody special, just we go there just to be with and in community with people who are like-minded. My behavior changes slowly. You don't change 40, 50 years of behavior in 5 minutes, 5 weeks, or 5 months. I need to be around other men who I can look up to, who will model for me the kind of lives that I want to live. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I got it all perfect, because there's still temptation. It doesn't go away, okay? If you're not with other people on a regular basis in a small group or seeker sharing group or something of that sort, you need to be, because life and marriage today is just way too hard to try to do it by yourself, okay?
Really quickly, I guess I would just say, to women especially, just because I am one, gee, amazing, isn't it? Is if during all of the tough times and the hurtful times and the tension that we cause one another, if I can just look at Tom and try to see him as I believe God sees him. I know that sounds like pie in the sky when he's really a jerk. And he still is now and then. But if I can think about the amazing sanctity of marriage and how privileged we are that God, lots of people are alone and lots of people are really lonely. And I have a person here that God gave me to love and to nurture and to care for and to put up with and to beat up on and to go through all of this stuff with. And I guess I just ask you, the same as I did at the end of our talk last week, is if you can just look at how amazing that can be and where you could be if you really, really worked on it. And if you could just look at one another the way God sees you and try for a moment when it hurts the most to think about how God sees him and what God wants for us. And sometimes that's all I need, is to step back for a second and think about where I would be without Tom and how much God will bless us if we just make the first step.
Thank you very much. I'd like to close with that.